I had always looked up to my sister, Lila. She was bold, beautiful, and effortlessly popular. Growing up, I'd followed her lead, proud to have a role model, someone who seemed untouchable. But when I started college, I began to see a side of her I never expected, one that would turn my world upside down. The first day of my freshman year, I was nervous but excited. The campus was alive with chatter, laughter, and the constant hum of students rushing to their classes. I carried my books tightly to my chest, scanning for familiar faces. Then I saw her, Lila. She was already surrounded by a group of friends, laughing loudly. At first, I felt comforted. She was here, after all. My sister, my protector. But when our eyes met, I noticed a faint smirk. A twist in her lips I couldn't place. I brushed it off as nerves. By the second week, it became clear. Lila wasn't here to help me navigate college life. She had brought her friends, the same girls who always hung on her every word, into my world, but with one purpose: to make me the target. It started subtly. My papers disappeared from the library desk, classmates laughed at things I hadn't said, and Lila's friends whispered while glancing in my direction. Every time I tried to defend myself, Lila would appear behind them with that same smirk, pretending she had no idea what was happening. One afternoon, I sat in the cafeteria alone, trying to eat my lunch in peace. Lila and her friends arrived, giggling, and chose the table beside mine. "Hey, look who's all by herself," Lila said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Her friends snickered. I tried to ignore them, pretending I hadn't heard, but the laughter followed me like a shadow. Things escalated quickly. Group projects became battlegrounds. Lila would volunteer to partner with me, only to undermine my contributions, rewrite my ideas as her own, and charm the professors with her charisma. Her friends made sure no one defended me. They laughed at my mistakes, exaggerated my missteps, and painted me as the insecure, awkward younger sister. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why Lila, someone I had loved and trusted, was treating me like this. Was it jealousy? Was it fun for her? Or did she simply enjoy seeing me struggle while she thrived? One evening, I overheard her talking on the phone with one of her friends. Her voice was calm, almost playful. "Don't let her get a single win. Make sure everyone knows she's a nobody," she said. My stomach sank. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional. That night, as I stared at the dark ceiling of my dorm room, the truth hit me hard. My sister had become my worst enemy. And in a place where I thought I could start fresh, I had nowhere to hide. By the time midterms rolled around, I realized the bullying wasn't limited to pranks or subtle jabs. Lila had learned a skill far more dangerous: the art of manipulation. She didn't just rely on her friends to mock me in the cafeteria or on the quad. She had begun a campaign that was quietly eroding my reputation across the entire campus. It started with whispers. A classmate would approach me, hesitant, asking if the things they had heard were true. Every rumor had her fingerprints on it. I was lazy, unprepared, and unreliable. If I had thought college was a place where effort mattered, those illusions shattered overnight. People I had just met began avoiding group projects with me. Invitations to casual study sessions stopped. Even friends I had made in my dorm started keeping their distance, their eyes flicking nervously toward the tables where Lila and her clique lingered. One day, I discovered that Lila had hacked my college email. I had been wondering why my carefully written assignments were showing received late notices, or why professors seemed unimpressed by my work despite my effort. Lila had accessed my submissions, slightly altered files, and forwarded them to others under the guise of proof that I was disorganized. She even managed to subtly insert her own name as a contributor on group projects that were supposed to be solely mine. When I confronted her, she laughed, brushing it off as helping me make friends. Her friends, too, had perfected the art of social sabotage. One day, I overheard them whispering in the library. "If anyone notices her winning anything, we make sure it looks like she cheated," one of them said. I felt a wave of nausea. I realized they were not just participating, they were committed to enforcing Lila's agenda. Every social space I entered felt like a trap. Every conversation was monitored, every interaction a potential setup for humiliation. The professors, at first, were impartial, unaware of the subtle war Lila was orchestrating. But small discrepancies began to draw attention. Lila had a way of charming authority figures, offering a concerned smile while planting doubts about me. A minor complaint about a late assignment from her became evidence of my disorganization in front of professors who had never actually known me. My hard work was being twisted into proof of incompetence. One evening, I sat in my dorm room, textbooks open, staring blankly at the screen of my laptop. The tears came slowly at first, then faster. I had trusted my sister, confided in her, thought of her as my protector. Yet here she was, deliberately undermining me at every step, turning a place that should have been my sanctuary into a minefield. I tried to reach out to Lila directly. I thought a conversation might end the bullying, or at least make her understand the damage she was causing. She listened silently, her smile polite but cold. "I just want you to learn," she said casually. "College is tough. You'll thank me later." Her tone was chillingly calm, like she believed she was justified, like every act of cruelty was a lesson rather than a betrayal. By the end of that week, I realized that the battle was no longer just about surviving daily humiliation. Lila had made it personal, and she had assembled an army of friends to ensure I could not defend myself. My focus on studies, on friendships, even on basic confidence had been compromised. I was isolated, constantly anxious, and forced to navigate a world in which my own sister had become my fiercest opponent. And yet, in the quiet moments, amidst the tears and frustration, a stubborn thought took root. I would not let her define me. Her campaign of humiliation might have started, but it would not finish. I had to be clever, cautious, and resilient, because if I didn't fight back, college would not just be a challenge, it would become a cage. By the third month of the semester, Lila's control over my college life had grown so complete that I felt like a character in a story I hadn't agreed to star in. Every hallway I walked, every class I entered, seemed saturated with her presence and the silent judgment of her friends. The campus, once alive with possibility, had become a stage for her drama, and I was the unwilling lead in a performance of humiliation. It began with the social side. Invitations to dorm events, club meetings, and even casual study groups suddenly stopped coming. Friends I had thought I could trust started whispering, glancing nervously toward tables where Lila and her friends loitered. Every word I spoke seemed to be twisted before it reached the ears of others. One of her friends approached me with a friendly warning. "You should probably watch what you post online. People are noticing things." The vague threat sent a cold shiver down my spine. Academically, the pressure was equally suffocating. Lila somehow managed to accidentally discover the topics I was most passionate about for papers and presentations. Then, in subtle ways, she would replicate my ideas in her work, present them as her own, or make sure professors saw only her contributions. During group projects, she became a master of misdirection, assigning me extra tasks while taking credit for my results, charming professors with her natural charisma. I began to dread every interaction, knowing that my efforts would likely be stolen or ridiculed. One evening, while trying to finish a research paper in the library, I overheard Lila whispering to one of her friends, "Don't let her shine. We can't have anyone thinking she's better than me. It'll ruin everything." My heart sank. She had no intention of leaving me alone. This was a systematic campaign, and it had been in motion long before I even realized it. Her friends laughed quietly, nodding along as if it were a game, and in some ways, it was for them, a sport at my expense. Even my professors began to notice inconsistencies, but instead of supporting me, their skepticism was amplified by Lila's charm. She would casually drop comments about my lateness or lack of preparation, carefully framed as concern. To them, she was the diligent, polite student. I was the one causing issues. I began to wonder if I was fighting a losing battle. The line between truth and manipulation had blurred so completely that even I questioned my own memory at times. Late at night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together a strategy. I needed allies, proof, anything that could shift the balance back. But every plan I considered was complicated by her constant surveillance and interference. Social media became a minefield, study sessions were sabotaged, and casual conversations were monitored. I had no privacy, no safe space, no moment where I could breathe without thinking about Lila's influence. And yet, in those dark moments, a determination began to form. She might have turned my college into her playground, but she underestimated one thing: my will to survive. If I could endure the isolation, gather evidence of her manipulation, and navigate the treacherous social landscape, I could reclaim my life. The stakes had grown higher than grades or friendships. They were about proving that I was not powerless, that the sister I once adored could not define my existence. For the first time, I understood that fighting Lila would require patience, cunning, and courage. And even though fear gnawed at me daily, the ember of defiance had been lit. By the middle of the semester, the weight of Lila's control over my life had become almost unbearable. Every hallway, every classroom, every interaction was a reminder that she and her friends had successfully turned the entire campus against me. Yet for the first time, I realized that despair alone would not free me. If I wanted to survive, I had to fight smart and silently. It began with observation. I started keeping a small notebook hidden in my backpack, noting every incident: who laughed, what was said, which assignments were sabotaged, and when rumors were spread. At first, it felt obsessive, but soon the details began forming a pattern. Lila's manipulation was deliberate, precise, and methodical. Every rumor had a source. Every social slight had a timing designed to maximize embarrassment, and every professor's doubt was carefully influenced. I also began to reclaim small victories. I reached out to one professor I had a good rapport with and requested guidance on a project, carefully documenting every interaction. For group assignments, I took extra care to submit drafts through multiple channels, saving copies and timestamps. Every action was a safeguard, a way to protect myself from Lila's interference. Slowly, I started to feel a flicker of control. But Lila was relentless. She noticed my subtle changes, though she could not pinpoint them. During one class, she publicly criticized a part of my presentation that she had already reviewed and subtly altered behind my back. Her friends laughed at the back of the room, and I felt the familiar sting of humiliation. Yet I did not react outwardly. I took notes, recorded the incident on my phone, and resolved to use it later. The first few times I restrained myself, it was excruciating. I longed to confront her in front of everyone, to scream that her lies were poison. But I knew that doing so without evidence would only play into her narrative. Socially, I started building alliances cautiously. One friend who had previously distanced herself due to Lila's rumors came forward, admitting she had been unsure whom to trust. Together, we developed a quiet support network, a few classmates who could corroborate events and provide balance to the stories Lila had spread. I realized that while Lila could manipulate perception, she could not manipulate everything. Small cracks existed, and I had to exploit them carefully. Meanwhile, Lila continued her charm campaign with the administration and professors. But I began documenting each instance meticulously, taking screenshots, saving emails, and noting witnesses. For the first time, I felt my power growing, not through confrontation, but through preparation. I was gathering proof that her attacks were deliberate, not accidents or misunderstandings. Late at night in my dorm, I reviewed my notes. The exhaustion was profound, but I also felt a quiet sense of strategy forming. I understood that this was no longer just about surviving her bullying. It was about proving, to everyone, that her lies had limits and her manipulation had consequences. And beneath the fear, the humiliation, and the constant anxiety, a stubborn determination had taken root. I would not let my sister's cruelty define my college experience. She had underestimated me, and I was preparing to show her that while she could bully and manipulate, she could not break me. By the time finals approached, the constant tension had become almost unbearable. Lila's bullying had reached a new level of intensity. Her whispers in the hallways, subtle sabotage of my assignments, and manipulative charm with professors had created an atmosphere where even my closest friends seemed unsure whom to believe. Yet beneath the pressure, I felt a quiet determination forming. I would no longer be her victim. It was time to turn the tables. I began systematically gathering evidence. Every altered assignment, every manipulated group project, every whispered rumor, everything was documented. Screenshots, emails, and timestamps were carefully stored in folders, each one a testament to the deliberate patterns of harassment. I even recorded interactions when it was allowed, taking care not to break any rules, knowing that each small piece could one day dismantle the carefully constructed image Lila had built. Socially, I started repairing bridges that Lila had tried to burn. One by one, classmates who had been swayed by her stories saw inconsistencies in her narrative. A friend who had once avoided me approached, quietly admitting she had started noticing how Lila exaggerated minor events. "I wasn't sure," she said softly, "but now I see what's been happening." Slowly, a small network of allies formed, people willing to stand by me and corroborate my experiences. Academically, I took additional precautions. Every submission was backed up on multiple platforms, and I made copies for myself. I discreetly informed professors of the irregularities, framing it as a precaution rather than an accusation. Some were skeptical at first, but the meticulous documentation made it impossible to ignore. My work, once overshadowed by Lila's manipulations, began to shine with clarity and undeniable merit. The breakthrough came during a group project for one of my major courses. Lila attempted to claim credit for sections of the work I had completed alone, confident that no one could disprove her. But this time, I had concrete proof. I presented saved drafts, timestamps, and email chains to the professor. Lila's confidence faltered, her smile slipping for the first time in weeks. I remained calm, composed, and factual. There was no room for her usual manipulation. Word began to spread, quietly at first, then more openly. Lila's friends, once eager to support her, began whispering amongst themselves. Her control over the social dynamic was weakening. People who had once laughed at my missteps were now seeing a pattern of deception. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. Where she had built herself as the untouchable star, cracks were appearing, small, but unmistakable. Even so, I remained cautious. I knew Lila would not surrender quietly. She had spent months orchestrating her dominance. A single misstep could reignite chaos. But for the first time, I felt a sense of agency I had not experienced since the semester began. I was no longer a passive victim. I was a strategist, a survivor, quietly reclaiming control over my life. As I left the classroom that day, I felt the first spark of hope. The bullying had not yet ended, and the social war was far from over. But Lila's carefully constructed empire of lies was no longer untouchable. And I knew, with a steady certainty, that I was prepared to dismantle it piece by piece. By the start of the final month of the semester, Lila's control over the social and academic environment had weakened, but she was far from defeated. Her confidence, once unshakable, now carried a subtle tension, an edge that hadn't been there before. I knew that to finally end her campaign, I had to expose the truth publicly and carefully, without giving her any opportunity to twist the story again. I spent nights compiling evidence into a clear, undeniable record. Emails showing her attempts to sabotage assignments, screenshots of her messages to friends plotting social humiliation, and draft copies of my projects with time-stamped edits, all organized meticulously. Every piece was a thread in the web of proof demonstrating her calculated manipulation. I realized that while fear and isolation had kept me silent before, now clarity and preparation were my greatest weapons. I began sharing my evidence with professors, one at a time, presenting facts calmly and methodically. No emotion, no accusations, just clear proof of Lila's interference. Some professors were shocked. Others expressed disappointment, realizing they had been unknowingly influenced by her charm and manipulations. One of them quietly thanked me for bringing the matter to light before grades were finalized. Slowly, academic credibility that had once been undermined was restored. Socially, I began to reclaim my standing as well. I approached classmates who had been misled by Lila's stories, showing them the inconsistencies and proof of her manipulations. People were cautious at first, unsure if they should trust me after months of deception, but as the facts became undeniable, the shift began. Former allies of Lila's started distancing themselves, and whispers of her scheming spread quietly but effectively. The popularity she had wielded like a weapon began to crumble. The pivotal moment came during a final group meeting. Lila attempted to claim credit for a portion of a major project. Confident as ever, she smiled at the professor, expecting admiration. Instead, I calmly presented my documentation, drafts, emails, timestamps, and even corroborating notes from classmates who had witnessed her manipulation. The room went silent. Lila's expression flickered between shock and panic as the professor, fully aware of the situation now, questioned her inconsistencies. Her friends no longer jumped in to defend her. They'd started to realize the truth. For the first time, I saw Lila as she truly was, not untouchable, not perfect, not admired, but vulnerable. Her power over me and everyone around her had been carefully maintained through fear, lies, and charm, and now it was unraveling in real time. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting. Just the quiet realization that her manipulations no longer held sway. That evening, as I walked back to my dorm, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The months of isolation, anxiety, and relentless bullying had been harrowing, but the struggle had strengthened me. I had learned to navigate deceit, defend myself calmly, and reclaim control over my life. Lila's reign over my world was finally ending, not through revenge, but through truth, patience, and perseverance. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The battle wasn't over completely, but the tide had turned. And I knew that nothing, not lies, not rumors, not even the sister I once trusted most, could ever hold me captive again. The final weeks of the semester brought a strange sense of calm, though the aftermath of Lila's manipulations still lingered like a shadow. Her power over me and my world had been broken, but the process had left scars on my confidence, my friendships, and my sense of trust. It was time to rebuild, to reclaim what she had tried to destroy. Academically, the results were undeniable. Professors who had once been subtly swayed by Lila's influence began recognizing my true effort and ability. My grades reflected hard work, dedication, and resilience. The final project, once a battlefield, now stood as a testament to my perseverance. When the grades were posted, I felt a quiet triumph, not out of vengeance, but out of validation. My work spoke for itself, and no one could take that away. Socially, the campus atmosphere shifted. Friends who had been hesitant at first now approached me openly, acknowledging the unfairness of Lila's actions and offering support. The whispers and judgments that had once followed me began to fade. I started rebuilding relationships on honesty, taking care to maintain boundaries and protect myself from manipulation. Even those who had once laughed or ignored my struggles now respected the way I had handled the situation, with patience, strategy, and dignity. As for Lila, she retreated into a quieter, less confident persona. Her clique began to disband as friends distanced themselves after witnessing her manipulations. She no longer held sway over professors or classmates. The sister who had once been my tormentor was now a distant figure, a reminder of what betrayal can look like when it's carefully disguised by charm. I learned to forgive, but not blindly. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about excusing her actions. It was about freeing myself from the hold of anger and resentment. I didn't need her apology, her acknowledgement, or her approval. What mattered was that I had reclaimed control over my own life, my voice, and my choices. Life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. I joined new clubs, built friendships based on mutual respect, and focused on my passions without fear of sabotage. I became more discerning, more confident, and more self-aware. The experience had taught me lessons that no classroom could: resilience, discernment, and the strength that comes from facing betrayal head-on. One evening, sitting on a bench in the quiet campus courtyard, I reflected on everything that had happened. I had entered college with excitement and optimism, only to be betrayed by the person I trusted most. Yet I had survived, adapted, and emerged stronger. I realized that the ordeal had not defined me. It had refined me. The semester ended, and with it, the shadow of Lila's bullying. I had faced fear, isolation, and manipulation, but I had endured. I had reclaimed my voice, my reputation, and my sense of self. The sister who had once turned against me was no longer a threat. She was merely a lesson in the kind of strength I had discovered within myself. In the end, college was not just about grades or friendships. It was about learning to navigate life's challenges, even when betrayal comes from the person you trust most. And I had learned that some of the greatest victories come not from revenge, but from resilience, courage, and the unwavering decision to stand tall despite the odds.